to get this sort of power is actually quite difficult. And she's really good at navigating, like, I guess what you would call vocal weight, for lack of a better term. Notice how she's not going terribly high here. And that's because if she did, it wouldn't work out, right? You can add weight to your voice if you know where the highest note in the phrase is. If you know that the highest note in the phrase is a certain note, you can go as hard as you can on that note and then bring that kind of quality to the rest of the range. It takes a lot of understanding of not just your voice, but also the piece that you're singing. Together we'll win it all. That's really cool here. Hold on, let's talk about this. That's really cool. So this is like little crack into a slide. And that slide is really smooth. When you're doing what's called a glissando, which is a pretentious way of saying that slide is what it is, so it's a slide. When you're doing a slide, if you don't know what you're doing, it's a great exercise. Slides are a great exercise for trying to expand your range, trying to figure out high notes. But it definitely doesn't sound comfortable if you're learning to do it. So this is a really, really comfortable slide up into kind of this vocal fry on the top, which is very risky. But if you know how to do it, it doesn't necessarily need to be risky, but it can be draining if done excessively, no matter how good you are at it. So this is a very long-held note, but what's impressive to me isn't how long she's holding it, it's how on pitch she is without using anything other than a straight tone. And then she brings in the vibrato and then goes up with the belt. This delay, I guess it's part of the tour. Jeez, these growls are really tricky to do. So she's really smart for changing it as she's going higher. So the lower notes have the growl on. So whenever you do a growl, it's a vocal fry done differently, right? So it's a vocal fry. You can do a lot of things with vocal fry. Right? You can do throat bass. You can do a whole mess of things, right? The growl is when you lie to me. You kind of do that, right? So on your lower end, it's a little bit more friendly to do. Because what a vocal fry is your folds slapping together like that. Anyway, so they slap together like that. On your low end, they slap together less. On your high end, they slap together more. So that's why when you do it up high, it'll give you more, it's more draining. So she's doing growls in her low. She's done them in her high. I've heard her do it in her high, but she's doing it in her low here. And then she goes up. Immediately the larynx rises. The E vowel is nice there. That little crack can also help you find some levity. So it's a really, really interesting transition between one and the other. I think it's excellent. I mean, these are great. So one of the tricky things, okay, so we were talking about growls, we're talking about what is a vocal fry, right? And one of the ways it can go terribly wrong is if you put too much air behind it, because it will increase the force at which they slap. So why is that important? Look at where she is. She is on one knee, but look at how immaculate her posture is. And this matters because if you contract the torso, you will expend more air. The lungs are a plastic bag, basically. A glorified plastic bag inside connected to your rib cage. If you contract anything, your lungs will respond to that. They don't have structure of their own, so they rely on the torso. And yes, the diaphragm is involved, but saying diaphragmatic breathing is like saying heartbeat beating. It does it whether, like it's there whether or not you use it, right? The nerve endings in the diaphragm. So everything that you can use to control is based on muscles in the torso. So not only is she moving, which keeps you loose. Like, so take your arm, try to flex your bicep while moving your arm. You cannot do it because you cannot lock what is in motion, right? In order for the muscle to move, it cannot be tense. So the movement here helps with the posture. One thing to notice here too is her hips. And the reason I bring up her hips, the hips are a fulcrum, all right? Like, they're a big part of the body. They are very important in deciding how your posture is, right? I don't know if you've ever heard of anterior or posterior pelvic tilt, but it's like this affects your back, right? So if you arch your butt backwards, your back is going to flare. You arch your hips forward, you're going to have a slouched posture. So tight hips are very, very much a part of bad posture, and having loose hips is very important. Look at how free her hip movement is. And that matters because if your hips are really tight, this, what we saw here, with her really good posture, that's not possible with tight hips. So that's why I bring it up. These lights need a warning. That's a lovely belt there. That's also nice. One of the things about belting that is really interesting is we've all done it in our lives. If you ever said, "Hey, Mom," or your friends across the street, "Hey, Billy," or whatever, that call, which is not a shout, but it's a call. That's kind of a shout, but not. That's basically belting. And the way we use it in life is we don't generally sustain it. It's cool when it's sustained, but it's a lot safer when you're on tour and you're on stage for hours upon hours, and you don't get a lot of sleep because you're on tour and all the factors involved in touring. Sometimes it's just smarter to not sustain something that's really difficult and exhausting. So yeah, letting the delay take over. This is another thing you can do. You can use post-production effects. So she's letting the delay take over so that she doesn't have to sustain as long. Yes, growl. Oh. Whew. I love that tune in particular as well. That's so good. The way that she's using vowels in that run, so it's not just that she is like doing a bunch of notes, right? The vowel changes in the run themselves are what make it possible to discern like how many notes are there. Like there's groupings, right? The notes have groupings. And it gives structure and life to the run. That's again more that belting, but getting off of it real quick. Right? It doesn't sound bad at all, right? So it's really important that singers have a repertoire of ways to get out of basically vocally exhausting yourself. We did a deep dive onto Ariana Grande and how she does it, but there's a lot of tricks here. So not sustaining a belt when you don't need to. Right? Getting out of really, really demanding vocals and straining vocals and belting by going into a run is another method. See? So both tricks there. Not sustaining the belt and then getting off of the belt with a run. Why does that work? Why is it important to get away from a belt with a run? When you belt, your folds are very, very short and thick. When you do a run, they become thin because they have to in order to move quickly. So the cricoid tilt will shorten and fatten the folds. That's what you hear in a belt. And then if you let that go and then go into a run, this happens. And so it's a really smart way to get out of a belt. It takes a little bit of extra coordination, but it's a lot healthier vocally. And this is really nice here. She has a good, she has a really good sense of when to put in vibrato. That's really cool. So I love when people, there are a lot of people in the singing subreddit, and I should, right there's a giant asterisk because it's Reddit. But there are people who are like, I don't want to learn to sing classical. I want to learn to sing belt. Why not both? Because when you can do both, you can do this. So she went from cricoid tilt, which is belt, to thyroid tilt, which is classical, and gives vibrato. And there are some instances where she does both at the same time, which is possible. I hate when fans sing. I hate it, because why? I'm not here to see you. Taking us a little too far. Chasing you. Lovely, lovely little falsetto. It's important to develop your falsetto and not forget about it. And especially on the oo vowel. The falsetto and the oo vowel get along very nicely. Falsetto gives you a more ethereal thing, and the oo vowel tends to have less going on. And that pairing makes it very ethereal. Chasing you, because I got you. I also want to point out how her vibrato kicks in on the oo vowel. For some reason, oo vowel tends to bring out thyroid tilting, which is the classical singing thing here. Notice how even that vibrato is. Listen to how musical she is. This is incredible. Her freaking sense of rhythm and her ability to be in time with her instrumentalists. Listen to the bass and listen to her. To be that in time with your band takes a tremendous amount of practice. It's very difficult the farther apart you are. So while she's dancing and in front of the stage, I mean, luckily she has an earpiece. Otherwise, it's like impossible to be in time. But yeah, it's still really impressive musically. Her mic technique is on point. And you might think that that sounds, you might think that that doesn't sound like her pulling away is not in time or coordinated with the belt itself. But what you have to remember is that in big arenas like this, the speakers are very far away. So what you're hearing has a slight delay. So keep that in mind when you're watching this mic. So that mic pull away makes more sense when you account for the time delay. The speed of sound is fast, but when you got a big stage, it will make a difference in the timing in which you hear things. Even if you're as little as 20 feet away, you start to get a delay. This is something I think Rachel Farrell is the queen of, is this vowel stuff, but I love how Beyonce is doing it right here. You know, vowels are so responsible for tone quality, right? There's a lot to do there. And so when you hear this, you really are hearing different colors being shaped by a singer who's really playing with the vowels here. Right? Because E, there's a lot of different ways to sing E, right? E, right? You can do that droop thing that she does. There's a lot of ways to sing the same vowels. And so that ability to change and play with the tone colors is a big part of singing. I'd say it's a fundamental part. Oh. Those growls here. So there's a channel I really like and a singer I really like on YouTube. Forget his full name, but Jaron is his first name. And he talks a lot about growling. And I talked to my voice and speech pathologist contact because I like to know this stuff. And growling up high is just kind of dangerous. And so I was asking her why anybody does it or how anybody does it. Because you go listen to Leandria Johnson and that woman could growl her face off up in her high range. And what the voice and speech pathologist person said to me was that if you grow up around it, like Italian fishmongers can belt like that because they are around it their whole lives. And we're not going to go look up footage of Italian fish markets because I don't like gross fish parts. But when you're growing up around a lot of people who can do this, sort of that when you grow up around people who can do that, for some reason, it's, I don't know, people who grow up around it are more comfortable with doing very difficult things because it's not really difficult. It's part and parcel of what you're around growing up. So. All that I can think
darlings. We should get married. We should get married.
So I want you to hear these aspirates that she's using to get this breathy tone here.
We should get married. We should get married.
So on the bottom of married, at the end of that word, it gets breathy. And it's a great way to tie off a phrase, especially when you're in your low like this. People want to push their lows, but if you do that, you don't sound good. You might sound good to yourself because what you hear is different than what everyone else hears. Bone conduction and all that, that's a whole different can of worms.
We should get married.
You hear how she kind of whispers married? It's a great way to not tie yourself by pushing down your low. Your low doesn't have to be powerful if you're not a singer who's known for their lows, right? And that can be an expressive tool. Probably the best person to look at that for is Jasmine Sullivan, because she does a whole lot of stuff with her lows. It's really cool.
We should get married.
Water, not wine. Just want to say that. That is beautiful falsetto. That right there. That's the stuff. That's the business. Lovely. So this is where we were having a discussion before on the stream between mix and falsetto. And people use mixed and falsetto as if it's deterministic and there's two modes and you switch this switch and you switch that off. There's this entire range of motion. Falsetto, pure falsetto, is boom, folds are open, edges are oscillating at the frequency you're singing at, right? But there's all of this. So when does it become falsetto and when does it become mixed? It's disadvantageous to think of the voice in this way. If you think, okay, pure falsetto, and then there's everything in between, right? And this being vocal closure, right? There can be some, there can be a lot, there can be, a whole mix of contact. I just thought of that. I'm going to patent that. No, I'm not. But listen to how wonderful, something on the lighter end where there's less vocal closure can sound. That's beautiful. And that is basically straight up classical singing on a very light dynamic like a piano. And she's doing that in an outfit that looks fantastic, but I couldn't wear that. I could try, but it's not going to look as good. She might as well be singing an aria. This is straight up classical. Beyonce gets way too much criticism on the idea that she lip syncs a lot. If you listen carefully, some of these notes are flat, and before anyone who stands her is jumps down my throat, when you have something from a phone recording, it perceptively sounds way flatter than it does live. So when I say flat, I'm talking about she's not cent perfect. What is a cent? It's 1/100th of a half step, okay? So she's not cent perfect. If she were lip syncing, it would be cent perfect, because why wouldn't you just slap on some autotune there? So this is not cent perfect. So that means she's not lip syncing. And the reason why it goes just a hair flat, and again, when it's a phone recording, it sounds way flatter than it actually is. The reason why it's going just a tiny bit, 1 cent or 2 cent under, is because of her straight toning it. To get this ethereal effect, so if you're going up high, There's a certain point where raising your larynx doesn't do it, where thinning your folds doesn't do it. If you want to sound like you're not in pure falsetto, one of two things has to happen. You either have to tilt your cricoid cartilage and then belt, or you have to tilt your thyroid cartilage, and then you're going to get vibrato. But the problem with vibrato in this context is it's not ethereal, and it's not what she wants. So she tilts the thyroid cartilage, but uses tension to prevent the thyroid cartilage from oscillating the way it tends to do on its own. By adding that tension for effect, it does drive the pitch down a little bit. But imagine in a world where this has vibrato all the way through, it doesn't have the same effect. If that has vibrato through the whole thing, it's not the same thing. So this is where artistic decision making comes into effect as it pertains to vocal technique.
Oh my God!
I swear, some of these fan things are like. There's a whole lot of stuff happening here. So that's definitely the lighter end of things, and this is what she's so good at. And any good, great artist understands that the most dramatic thing you can do is have incredible contrast, or like a really strong choice in one end of the spectrum, and then a really strong choice in another end of the spectrum. So watch how she goes light. And then, so that growl into the belt, into the sobby tone that she was doing with the vowels, like strong choice on different ends of the spectrum, and it makes it incredibly interesting and compelling. And another example of people needing to shut up about her lip syncing. You see how her hand hit the mic? You hear that sound? That's from hitting the mic. Or it might be the drum. Hold on, let me actually see that. I'm about to look a fool. No, okay, she didn't hit it. That's the drummer. Oops. If I really cared about my reputation, I would edit that part out. Oh well. Listen to how she's hitting this same note, never the same way twice, right? Right, the growl, the little crack sob there. She's just incredibly good at being specific about every little thing in every phrase. Part of me wants to stream one of my practice sessions where I take a piece of music and I make all kinds of markings on it. Because I don't think people sit down with their music enough. She wrote these things or co-wrote these things, and she's not done. If you go on performing an album or several albums for years and years and years on end, and you don't make consistent changes, you're going to sound boring because you're kind of bored. You need to add and play with things as you go, or you're going to lose interest. Okay, once again, even in this position, look at how even her hips are, right? I think most of us would have this, would sort of like, wouldn't get, you know, just be off. And if that's off, so is your breath. The fact that she has such, like, even hips, even in this position, it's almost like Beyonce is a really good dancer or something. Is that the audience, or is that her just with massive delay? I don't know. It could be both. And this is where having really long hair during a performance is excellent to have. It's a wonderful tool and option. If I did this, it would look weird. It'd look like I'm senselessly undulating, right? Like, what am I doing? I don't even know what I'm doing. But when you have long hair, you could do this. And this is possibly the one thing that R&B singers and metal performers have in common: the hair flip. It's important. See what I'm saying? Beyonce's getting her hair flip on. I love, you know, for some, I learned, you know, I was trained as an opera singer, so generally in opera you want vibrato throughout your entire range for reasons. Basically, like, there's only so many ways you can project over an orchestra. So the thyroid cartilage needs to be tilted pretty much at all times. It adds depth and power. But when you get out of that, you know, needing to project over an orchestra, you get a lot of options here. And I love in particular how she goes and puts the thyroid tilt on her lows. For someone who's, you know, Beyonce's doesn't have like a ginormous low voice. So what she's doing here, low, 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 she's tilting the the thyroid cartilage at the end of the phrase on the low note. So and again, the thyroid tilt adds depth. So if I do, oh, the second I get there, down there, it doesn't sound as connected, right? It sounds like just ran out of steam. I'm in my low now. But by not tilting, no, 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 and then adding the thyroid tilt there, you're getting a lot of sweetness that ends up making the phrase even. And this is really thoughtful and cool. Like, I wouldn't have thought to do that, but it makes sense that she would, and that it's possible. This is nice, this falsetto right here. And again, when you go up high and you want straight tone, it's difficult to make that sound like effortless. So she was really smart in getting off of it. If she tried to sustain that, it would have kind of drained her vocally. So, smart decisions. Jaren, I'm not sure if I'm pronouncing his name right. He does a lot of reacts on YouTube. And he had a term for, like, letting this kind of drop. That drop where you kind of just, like, let the voice go and the posture go. Is just a cool little way to tie the end of a phrase together. That's really, really, really interesting. So musically, we're going in a different space. So that's a modulation, or what's it called? Secondary dominant. There's ways to change what key you're in temporarily that you wouldn't call straight up modulation into a different key. And this is particularly predominant in like jazz, and then there are a lot of elements of R&B that borrow from jazz. If you listen to Brian McKnight play piano, or India Carney play piano, you're going to see exactly what I'm talking about. But when you're a singer, you have to be able to navigate melodically the changes that happen harmonically. If that makes sense, right? You have certain chords that you're changing, so the notes that those chords are changed to are now outside of the scale that you were in. So you have to change the scale you're using. What is, to me, the key of a lot of her, what is impressive here about her musicianship in this moment is that she does this without hearing the harmony. She's just melodically making that shift. So she's initiating the change in the harmony by providing the melody, and then the chord came later. So, like, to be able to melodically initiate a modulation is very, 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 very musically sophisticated. Use of consonants to be percussive. So nice. More hair flip. Very important. Two hair flips. Look at the way that this is emphasizing the performance and bringing out a quality in the performance that would be not there if there were no hair flips. Imagine a world, and yes, I'm kind of joking, but I'm also not. Imagine a world where she just like stands there. Like, who's more interesting to watch right now, me or Beyonce? I mean, it's always Beyonce, but in this particular moment, it's particularly interesting to watch Beyonce because I'm just going to stare at the camera awkwardly. And now everyone feels weird. That's so many people. That's so many people. Of course she's playing stadiums. Oh, that's really nice. Let's talk about that for a tick. So again, this is more of that like belting into the different tilts, right? The different tilts being the thyroid, more classical of your vibrato, the belting, the cricoid tilt, you know, get your belt on. Really good singers switch between the two. Maybe not frequently, but they switch between the two. Some of the more amazing singers that we've covered on the channel switch between the two fast, or use both at the same time. So that is both tilting at the same time. Listen to the power behind the belt. And then she brings in that vibrato. You can't get much louder and more epic than both tilts at the same time. I don't know what's going on with those neighbors, but I'm staying inside. that. I love this little flip into falsetto here. It's really tough, and this is unfortunate. I really think production companies should record these live performances because it's really hard to tell what's going on. When someone is this far back, is it delay? Is it the speakers not being in sync with one another? Because you have to time, in a big space like this, you have to time the speakers accordingly. Like, this one has to be delayed, this one has to be on time. Like, you have to account for the fact that the speed of sound is not instant. So the people they hire to do big sets like this across a stadium are incredibly sophisticated from a like just raw physics point of view. But when you're this far back, there can also be a slap back from different walls. So it's really unfortunate that we don't get to hear clearly what's happening. But it's still lovely. Like, regardless of our difficulty in hearing when it's happening, put outside the when and hear what's actually happening vocally. It's beautiful. Opera singers are loud, y'all. Like, I don't know. Like, look at how far that mic has to be. So, back to this whole opera singing is loud thing. I've actually run into this situation before in not quite as spacious venues, more like bars, where I was doing a number that was like, that had some opera in it. And I never exactly knew how to deal with it because it was just not loud enough to be heard without amplification, but any mic I put in front was just distorting like all crazy. So one of the things that, even like if you go to an AVA competition, which Academy of Vocal Arts is not like a school where basically they're teaching people to sing opera, or if you go and watch like a Pavarotti recording, you'll see that there's quite a bit of distance between the microphone and the singer. So this is kind of understandable in this situation here. Just great classical chops. Nice. I love how she brings it back on the U there. It's crazy to imagine that everybody in this stadium paid like what, like $300 or something crazy for a ticket. Like, dang. There's a lot of really cool things going on here. And it is hard to hear with the audio quality, but... So that's belting, right? And then she does the thing where she belts and then leaves it with a run. So it's difficult because it takes, depending on how high you are, the tilt needs to be a certain amount, and to be able to tilt and release and do all that stuff is athletic, right? It's like a boxer throws a punch and then takes it back, and so there's this tension and release that has to happen when you snap your punches. Same idea here is that this has to tilt, and then if you're going to go in a run, it has to untilt immediately. Right? So, and in this instance, interestingly enough, she doesn't untilt it immediately. She tilts it less to make the voice more mobile. Goes to that ooh vowel. Cricoid tilting will make your folds fat and shorter. But there is this range of motion, right? Like it's not like there's two positions. There's this whole range of motion. So it's really cool that she'll do like a stronger belt and then be able to move around like that. The first one, she lets it go entirely, and then the second one, she kind of keeps, she untilted a little bit, but it's still a little bit tilted. That's really interesting. And again, this belt to the classical thing is so cool. It's literally the reason I started learning the belt, is because of this stuff right here. Yes. Yes, please. And again, that rapid tilting and untilting in combination with mic technique is so cool. Oh, yes. Okay, girl. So on a day that you might not be at your best, which happens, the human voice is actually a really volatile instrument. So you have to learn what to do when not everything is working. And the answer can't always be lip sync. So in this instance, what we're seeing is her use of aspirates. And f, even though f is a fricative. But the point is that they're unvoiced consonants, and this is significant because high notes take less air. So if you have a consonant that's unvoiced, you can dump air while singing the consonant in order to have an easier time on your high notes. So on hear and feel, she's dumping air. And right there, she doesn't have to as much. So the F is shorter for that reason. Let's listen to this again. It's really subtle. You can hear a little H after the F here. It's here. So that's her dumping air there. That's her going right into the tone right there. Okay. Her hair flips, even with a ponytail, immaculate. That is so precarious. And we've discussed this a little bit in this video regarding the growling on top. You wouldn't think it. Just like high notes you wouldn't think take less air, you wouldn't think growling takes even less than that. The folds are slapping together like that during a vocal fry, which is what a growl is, basically. So if you're higher, where your folds are thinner and they're beating together, you have to understand, for a woman, the size of the vocal folds are about the size of a dime. Very small. So you're already small there, Then you're going up higher with folds that are even thinner, and then you're slapping them together. You can see how this could turn out very badly. The only way that this is possible is with such little air to where the slaps are not going to cause what's called a vocal hemorrhage, which is there's bleeding on the vocal folds. So you have to know how to do this with incredible grace and precision. Even though it sounds rough and messy, it is like a surgeon in terms of how precise it has to be. And especially because with an act like Beyonce, vocal damage could cost millions of dollars in lost revenue, right? And listen to how easily and quickly she gets off of it, too. This is really cool. So she's doing, again, this surgical precision thing with the growling on top.
Did you hear me? Did you hear me? Help me! Did you hear me?
That was a dab. She just dabbed. Right? So, I mean, what's cool about this video, even though it's a little redundant, what's cool is that we're hearing the same phrase over and over and over again, done differently throughout the tour. This is really, really valuable. Perhaps not for the average spectator, but for someone who really wants to deep dive into singing, it's so important that you never rely on singing the same way twice, and that you have options and understanding, that you don't think that there's a specific way to play a piece, right? That's when you get stiff, rigid, and boring. But we also get to see how Beyonce navigates on her nights that she's very vocally fresh versus when she's having some, she's not perfectly all there, which again, the voice is a very fragile instrument, very particular. So what we see here is adaptations aplenty. Right? The difference between this, the one growl we heard where she goes smoothly into the notes, here she... Here she's going to growl and get off of it. There she sustains the growl way longer, going into a run. So it's not enough to be good on your best days. If you're a hobbyist, sure, you can record on your best days and then none other times that you're not feeling well. But if you're a professional, you have to understand how to work your voice when it's not in its best condition. Maybe you didn't sleep well. Maybe you have acid reflux. I mean, there's a ton of things that can get in the way of pristine vocal health. Very delicate instrument. So you have to know how to navigate that stuff day to day. And there's no substitute in that regard for singing a lot and being careful when you're not well, but also kind of navigating it and trying to be gentle with yourself. It takes a lot of experience. There's no shortcuts in this one. She's got so much energy. Like, I walk a block, and all of a sudden I need, whenever I walk my dog, I'm, walking a block, I'm like, hold on, let me catch my breath, right? She's dancing, performing, singing, literally jumping around, and she looks great. Not a bead of sweat on her that I can see. You know, and I'm just need to go work out now because I'm out of shape. Nice. It should go without saying that a performer like Beyonce during you know, the concert in a stadium, she can't be like, hold on, let me catch my breath, just give me a second here. Like, you know, obviously she can't do that. Be funny, but she doesn't. The endurance that you have to build up, not just vocally but physically, to put on a show like this. I mean, this is what frustrates me when people that I know who are opera singers like to play elitist and like to say, you know, she's not as good as XYZ or another singer that they know. A, different skill set, and different does not mean worse, but also, like, there's no respect for the fact that she's on stage for 2 hours or 3 hours without a break, without an understudy. You know, in a theater or in an opera gig, you are not on stage, even if you're the lead, you're not on stage the entire time. You get breaks. This show is Beyonce. That's the show. She's on stage the whole time. So it's endurance in a different way. Pop singers who make their dollars on vocally challenging music have the hardest singing job you could possibly imagine. I mean, musical theater is close with 8 shows a week, but again, you're not on a stage the whole time. It's crazy. Very much grabbing at the roots of gospel here, right? Like she's giving almost a sermon here. These runs are, by themselves, actually, they're not too complicated. And that's not a knock on them. One of the ways that you can really simply do a run that's a lot more interesting than a scale is you can do, like, note clusters. Pianists do this all the time. Like, I'm terrible at piano, but like there you can do, like, you know, chords and stuff like that, and like or you know, down by thirds, right? Stuff like that. And I guess what, right? So you can do these kind of patterns on piano. You can do the same thing with a voice. You can do these kind of patterns. And it's something that you should practice and develop, just like guitar players have their own licks and riffs. You can use your own patterns, note groupings. Right? Those are all the same. Right? And if you practice those different little note patterns, you'd be amazed how often you can fit it in and it makes sense. More note patterns. And before anyone thinks like that this somehow makes someone less, I mean, this is what Miles Davis does, Charlie Parker, like all the famous jazz musicians had certain choices that they would make where you knew it was them. And so I once, you know, was very poo-poo on licks and riffs and stuff. I used to play jazz guitar. And my teacher said, it's always nice to have options, and it's always nice for things to be interesting. I wanted to be able to have freedom across scales and arpeggios. I just wanted to sound really good and make things up on the fly. But that's actually not how you do that. You are able to make stuff up on the fly, not because you've played a bunch of scales, but because you've done a bunch of different patterns and licks and tricks and all that stuff. You have to accumulate a significant amount of options in order to have choices that are interesting.
Telling me Steve's gonna run away, oh, may the last one burn into flames. Freedom, freedom, I can't move. Freedom, cut me loose, yeah. Freedom, freedom, we need freedom too. I break chains upon myself.
Punching consonants in your higher range is not a good idea at all. This is not our higher range. You can actually feel this if you just take T and take a long time to hit the T, let it build up in pressure. You can feel the back pressure. It's not fun. But when you're in your mid range and you're punching consonants for effect, you can get some really cool things here. It's just a really cool use of consonants. You can tell when she's going higher, she's not putting a consonant in front of it. So it's all these little different things you can do with the voice. It's just so awesome. And if you understand the options and you understand the limitations and you understand where something can work and where it can't, you get to make cool decisions like this. Yeah. Yeah, she's good. If you like this kind of video, check out the live streams. I got it right, finally. The live streams right over there, either one of the two. Pick whatever one interests you. That's where I let viewers decide what we're reacting to, what we're talking about. So if that interests you, go ahead and check those out.